All right, everyone. Good afternoon again. Thanks so much for making an hour out of your day, out of your busy schedules. I know you have a ton going on. I'm just super grateful that you're making an hour in your day to learn, and specifically learn about direct mail. So we're going to dive into some 5 secrets of direct mail that your agency might not want you to know. Tracy Howard from Mile 19 is joining us. She's going to be our direct mail insider for the day.
That's
Tracy,
me.
welcome.
Thank you.
Super glad you're here.
Thanks.
I asked some of you to sound off in the comments to see where people are tuning in from, which is kind of cool. I don't know if you've seen this. Paige Kelly from Baltimore, Maryland. We've got Alexa from Birmingham. Pepper Taylor, she's a Next After Institute member. I know that. From Ducks Unlimited, that's awesome. Cindy Dell from Pittsburgh. Tons of people. This is super cool.
All over, yeah.
I love seeing people all across the map. Brady Josephson, I know him. Look at all these Canadians. Check that out. Super cool.
Even the Canadians are
Even
here.
the Canadians. We love the Canadians. Pro-Canadian. All right, let's jump in. Before we get into the details, just a few quick things to cover. Many of you have asked, many of you will ask, so we'll cover it now. There will be a recording. We'll send the video out to you this evening. Around 5 p.m. Central Time is when I try to get that sent out to everyone. So we'll send you the video, but we'll also send you the slides, as well as some links to any additional resources that we'll mention during the webinar today. So you'll have all of that to go review. If you miss anything, you can go back and look at the slides, or you can share it with peers, colleagues, etc. We will also have some time for question and answer, which is one of my favorite parts of these webinars, just spending some time talking about what are the real burning questions that people have, especially in this field. I don't know much about direct mail. You do, so I'm curious.
Today is an education.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome.
It's going to be great.
It's going to be great. To ask those questions, you can use that same chat box you were using to tell us where you're from. If you have any questions or thoughts or comments or ideas or anything throughout the webinar today, just go over to the chat box, drop them in there, and then at the very end, Tracy and Karen will be able to answer all of your burning direct mail questions, so it's going to be great. Again, before we jump in, I want to make sure you know about this, the NEO Summit, the NIO Summit, Nonprofit Innovation and Optimization. This is our annual conference that we put on where we go out and we try to find some of the most forward-thinking for-profit marketing leaders and thought leaders. Find ideas that could be translated over to the nonprofit space and really help us as fundraisers and as marketers start to move the needle on generosity. So you can not only acquire more donors, acquire more revenue, but also just increase the impact that you can have for your cause. So it's 2 days, 16 plus speakers. Last year we had, I think, 607 people in attendance. We expect that to grow again this year. If you're interested in this, you can check it out at niosummit.com. You can learn more. You can see some videos from past summits and get your tickets. And if you get tickets now, you can actually save a bunch of money because we have a super early bird rate going right now for $745. So again, you can check that out at niosummit.com. But this is why you're here. Why in the world, you may be asking this. We've had this question, I've had this question in my email inbox this past week. So why in the world are we hosting a webinar on direct mail and direct mail secrets? If you've been on our webinars before or read our blog posts or anything like that, you know that we largely focus on online fundraising and new tactics and learnings and research and all that stuff. But I have 3 reasons for you why we're doing this. And number 1 is this, that we're obsessed with optimization as a whole and how can we optimize our way to see generosity increase. Now, it's really easy to optimize in online channels, at least functionally. There's lots of tools like Google Optimize, where you can just set up a test really quickly and really easily on your landing page, on your donation page, etc. Or it's really baked into most email tools at this point. You can quickly set up an email in MailChimp and split test it and see this subject line versus that subject line, this design versus that design. But optimization can apply in online channels and in offline channels. It's just a little bit harder in offline channels in some cases. So that's reason number 1. We're just obsessed with this idea of how can we optimize results. Number 2, there are some really, really strong indicators that syncing up your online and your offline channels, so your direct mail, as well as your emails and your advertising, all those things can actually improve response in a significant way. Here's an example, an experiment that's in our research library. This organization had this hypothesis that what if we showed people that were receiving our direct mail appeal, what if we showed them just branded advertising on Facebook? So they split their direct mail list in half. Version A got just the typical monthly direct mail appeal. It's kind of business as usual. Version B, same exact appeal, same exact time frame, same exact everything. The only difference was they actually targeted the recipients on Facebook with some branded advertising. They're not trying to get clicks. They're not trying to get donations online. They're just trying to reinforce the brand and get more brand impressions. And by just doing that simple little marketing retargeting effort, they saw a 154% increase in revenue, which is wild. Now, I will say, if you run this experiment yourself, you might not see a 154% increase. We've seen other organizations run it and see more like a 7% or a 12%. But the indicators are there that if you can start to sync up these channels together, you can actually see some really positive results. So that's reason number 2. There's some strong indicators you can boost response. And number 3, I'll hand this over to Tracy here in just a second. Bear with me. Optimizing direct mail might require that you actually bring some of it in-house. Now, you may have an agency that you really love, and that agency might be really willing to test new strategies and really figure out what works. But if you're in a situation where you don't think your agency would be willing to do that, it might be better for you to bring it in-house so you have a little bit more control over messaging and testing ideas and all that type of stuff. So it's just one option for you. And that's really why we're talking about this. So I'm going to close my mouth and hand it over to Tracy, because Tracy is really the expert. Tracy and Karen, both from Mile 19. I'll let you share a little bit more about Mile 19, but she's a managing partner at Mile 19. They really focus on direct mail and how you can actually bring that in-house. And she's going to spill the beans on the 5 secrets your agency might want you to know.
I'm going to open up the can of worms.
Great.
Spill them.
Let's do it.
All right. I appreciate it. Thank you. Well, it's good to be with you guys. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to take some time out of your day and talk about the 5 secrets that your direct mail agency doesn't want you to know. And then we'll kind of follow it at the end with 3 things that you can optimize today. So just give a short introduction of who we are, because you may or may not have heard of Mile 19. We're kind of a newcomer. We're sort of new to the agency world from the standpoint of having our own firm, but we've both been in the agency world for quite a while. So again, I'm Tracy Howard, and I'm joined in the studio here with my partner Karen, and she'll come out here and talk with us when it comes time for the questions. But Karen and I worked for several years together on many clients, running client strategy and running accounts together. And from there, got to be really good friends. And from friends, we decided to be partners and kind of go into our own thing. So that's me and that's Karen. And what makes us experts to be able to talk about the agencies in the direct mail world? Well, I'll give you just a little bit here. Between the 2 of us, we have 46 years of marketing experience. I say between the 2 of us because hopefully you can tell that wouldn't be all just my experience. Not quite that old. So our combined experience, 46 years in the marketing world in general. And that's across a variety of industries, and it's actually across a variety of capacities as well. I started out in design. We have experience in operations and client strategy and client account management, project management. So really every facet of the marketing world we've been a part of. And out of those 46 years between the 2 of us, we have 36 years specifically with marketing agencies. So when we talk about the 5 secrets that your direct mail agency doesn't want you to know, that comes in large part from having been on that side of the conference room table. So often, if you've gone in and been with your agency, the people on the other side, that was us for many, many years. In fact, 12 years I owned my own agency. So 36 years in the agency world. And then out of those 36 years between the 2 of us, 32 years specifically in helping nonprofits with their fundraising. So those are nonprofits that are faith-based, some that are not, really the whole gamut of organizations. We've spent 32 years combined working in the direct mail fundraising for nonprofits. And then between the 2 of us, that means we've done 1,100 plus direct mail campaigns. We say plus because we're in the process of still pushing more out the door even today. So that number continues to grow. And so we feel like we probably don't know everything at this point, but we consider ourselves somewhat of experts because of those combined years of experience, how many campaigns we've put out. So that's a little bit about who we are. And so what I want you to get today from our time together is a couple of things. Like I said, we're going to talk about the 5 secrets that your direct mail agency doesn't want you to know. What I'd like for you to walk away from that portion specifically is possibly saying, like, I had some suspicions about that, or even I had no idea about that, because we want it to be an eye-opener for sure, because we feel like if you can optimize your relationship with your agency, that will in turn turn into optimizing your direct mail program. So hopefully you'll find some nuggets in there that are unexpected. And then additionally, you'll find some things that are motivating that you can go back and say, now that's something I'd like to check into today because I don't know where we stand on that. And then when we talk about towards the end, the 3 things that you can optimize today, our hope is that you'll be able to say, these are simple changes I know that I could actually make today. Those are things that I can take and fully implement just today. We know that the likelihood is you're in the middle of a campaign, maybe even right now. It's in the middle of rounds of review, it's come across your desk, and we want you to be able to walk away today and say, I can absolutely change that right now. And so those are good nuggets. So then this is the portion. Before we get started, just another 20 seconds, I'd like to put a little disclaimer on things, and I'll tell you why. If you've ever watched a commercial for pharmaceuticals, then there is always a portion of the commercial where 20 or 30 seconds, they kind of go over all the side effects and they kind of go over the disclaimer. That's what this portion is. And I feel like there's two important things for me to say as a disclaimer. The first would be that we're not looking in any way to vilify our friends in the agency world. So as I told you in our experience, we both spent significant amount of years in the agency world. We have really good friends there. There are a lot of good people that work at agencies and who do really good work. And so it's important for me to just put a disclaimer out there that this is not to drag anybody through the mud or to make anybody feel like the work they're doing is not good. We know that agencies do a lot of valuable work. So I just want to put that out there. It's more about giving you some behind the scenes insights that you may or may not know that could really be helpful for you as you negotiate those relationships with your agency. And then the second portion of the disclaimer is that this is not a commercial for Mile 19. So you won't find in here, any slides in the PowerPoint where we talk about what Mile 19 does or how we do it or why you should become our client. That's not what it is. One of the things that was foundational for us when we started Mile 19 is that we wanted to be very open-handed with our knowledge and be able to teach our clients things that they may not know before, because ultimately we feel like knowledge is power, and if that can turn into more revenue and less cost, then that means more money in the pocket of the mission and getting more work done that you're looking to get done. So that's my disclaimer. It's not like the pharmaceuticals where it will cause vomiting or, any other kind of, odd side effects. So you don't have to worry about that. Hopefully it doesn't anyway. But I wanted to just put that out there. So let's get started. I'm going to take a sip of caffeine. You'd take one too, and a deep breath. And we'll get started. I'm going to count them down, kind of David Letterman style, which will give you a little bit of insight as to how old I am. So number 5. The number 5 secret a direct mail agency might not want you to know is that a jack of all trades is a master of none. And likely this is an old saying, a proverb maybe that your mom or your grandmother has passed down to you or said. A jack of all trades is a master of none. Now, there is something to be said for the jack of all trades, actually. It can actually be a real compliment. So I would say that my husband is a jack of all trades, and I've always found it very helpful that he can cook in the kitchen. He can help take care of things around the house. He knows some basics about doing our taxes, all of those kinds of things. But what happens with a jack of all trades is that it can be frustrating for both the person who is supposed to be a master and the person who's actually asking them to do masterful work. So often in the 22 years of our marriage, I have thought that because he may be good at, let's say, fixing, the mirror in the bathroom, that means he's able to actually remodel a bathroom. And that's not the case. And we've often had frustrations back and forth where he feels frustrated that I had that expectation of him, and I feel frustrated that he can't make good on that. So when we pay for a specialist, when we look for somebody who's a specialist, oftentimes the results are better than if you were just looking for a jack of all trades. So this is sort of the same in the medical field. This is how you have a team of doctors rather than just a general practitioner. You wouldn't go to your general practitioner for a heart problem, or you wouldn't go to your general practitioner for brain surgery. They're really more of a gateway to a team of specialists who can help you holistically. So when we think about that from a marketing standpoint and in the direct mail world, oftentimes an agency will like to promote the idea that they're a jack of all trades. But what the underlying thing is there that's not being said is then they're really not a master of one particular thing. So when we think of the different things that are part of the marketing components that you may or may not need, whether it's direct mail, digital media, telemarketing, branding, radio, television, the list goes on, you wouldn't necessarily want somebody who says to you that they can do all of those things. You might want to ask yourself, can that person really do all that? Can that agency really do all of those things? Doesn't an agency need a bit of specialism? So Peter Markey, who is the Chief Marketing Officer of one of the largest retailers in the United Kingdom, was asked the question in 2019, is it still pertinent for a company or an organization to hire an agency that is full spectrum and does everything in marketing? And he concluded with this point. He said, working with various specialized agencies can yield impressive results and solutions, and at times it causes a bit of a positive tension and competition is the cause. So oftentimes you'll find your direct mail agency when you've gone and asked them, like, well, we know that you're our agency, let's say for direct mail, can you also help us with our digital media? They're going to, given the opportunity, say, yes, we can help you with that. What you're going to find, though, is that a jack of all trades is a master of none. And that for the most part, agencies do have core competencies, even if they say and are given the opportunity, they will say that they're experts at each of your needs because they want to win the bid. But more likely than not, they're actually best at one thing and only okay at the other things. So this is something you want to be really careful about when you are looking to diversify what you're doing in your marketing program, or when you are talking with your agency around that boardroom table. You want to be really careful that if you offer up the fact that you're looking for somebody to do X, Y, Z in your marketing program, more than likely your agency will come back and we can do that, we can do that. And you want to be really careful because that's probably not where their core competency is. So it's important to remember that it's okay to diversify your agency portfolio and know that it could actually lead to better results. I think one of the things that's really important to know is that an agency's ability to put forth a proposal for work is not the same as their ability to execute the work. And so they will for sure give you a proposal if you ask for it, but it's okay to know that it's probably better for you to diversify your agency portfolio. Jack of all trades is a master of none. And in the situation of an agency, you don't want somebody who can kind of do everything a little bit. You want those core competencies and you want to diversify your portfolio. Okay? Number 4, there may be hidden landmines in your contract. Now, over the past 18 months or so, Karen and I have been working with a lot of clients who are in the process of taking their direct mail campaigns and taking their direct mail program in-house. And oftentimes it starts with having to look through the contract of what they are under and have agreed to with their agency. And what we're finding is that there are a lot of landmines in these contracts that often our clients don't really know about. So if you don't know the full breadth and width of what's in your contract, you may find that there are hidden things in there that you weren't sure about, didn't know about, and that could be affecting your program. And they come in, we've seen them in a few different ways, and so I'll highlight a few of them here. The first is the creative landmine. We're finding that a lot of clients may or may not realize that in their agency contract, they actually don't own their creative. And so if you were to want to leave your agency or move on to a different agency, you may find out that the packages that you have sent out don't actually belong to you. They belong to the agency. And what ends up happening then is, let's say if you have a control package that works really well for you, you don't own it. So now you've moved off to another agency or you've decided to take things in-house, your creative doesn't belong to you. It's a landmine that you might find in your contract. You may have to pay for the creative extra. You may be just told simply that you cannot use it. Or sometimes there's nebulous verbiage in there that says, as long as you substantially change the creative, you can have it, which is pretty subjective. So creative is one of the landmines. Another landmine that we're finding that people may not know or realize is in there is the per piece price. So oftentimes an agency will charge for a retainer fee, a monthly retainer fee to do the work for you. They'll also charge a design fee for the design of your campaign. But then what's in the contract and what you'll find in your invoicing is that there's also then a per piece price. And so if you send out 50,000 pieces of direct mail during that campaign, you may be paying an extra 5 cents, 8 cents per package. If you send 100,000 out, it might be four extra cents per piece. And so the per piece price gets a little bit dicey because you've already paid for a creative fee and a retainer fee, and now you're simply paying for the opportunity for the mail to go in the mail. This is also an interesting issue when it comes to segmentation. How is the agency arriving at how many pieces they're mailing? Are they arriving at that number because it's based on how much they get per piece? So that's something that you would want to look through and think through in your contract. Another landmine would be the long-term contract. We've noticed a lot of our clients may or may not know how long they have to stay in their contract with their agency. If they're ready to move on, is it a 60-day window? Is it a 90-day window? Are they not allowed out of their contract? So the long-term standpoint is something to look into. And finally, another one that we're seeing is limited engagements. And what I mean by this is oftentimes if you've worked with an agency for any period of time, you've developed a real relationship with the team of people that you work with. And what we're finding is if our clients want to move on from that agency contract, they are not under the understanding that they actually have a limited engagement that they're allowed to keep with the people they were working with. So if your writer has been writing for you for 5 years and does a great job and knows your voice and your brand, once you move on, it's very possible that your contract says you cannot work with them for a period of time. And so that might limit the engagements. When we talk about there being hidden landmines in your contract, the couple of things to remember is that your contract with your agency was written primarily to protect the agency, not necessarily your organization. Again, I want to go back to my disclaimer. I'm not looking to vilify, but there is a recognition that business is business. And so whenever a contract is handed to you, the person who has written the contract and is looking for your signature generally is looking out for themselves and protecting their good business. Fair enough. What it does require then on your point, from your standpoint, is that you should study and know the ins and outs of your contract. More often than not, I think clients will trust their agency and they've had such a long-standing relationship, they don't really know what's in there. It's good to be a student of the contract before you sign it. I mean, my mom and dad always taught me that, you never sign anything that you don't read. And I can tell you, I have never paid attention to that advice. I've purchased houses and cars and things where contracts are pages and pages long, and it's only on the flip side when you're trying to either turn the car back in or sell the car or sell the house that all of a sudden you realize you're under a contract that you didn't really realize. So we would recommend that you study and know the ins and outs of your contract. Take a time, even today, to go piece by piece and say, am I being charged? Am I limited on who I can engage with? Is the creative work mine? It would be good to be a good student of your own contract. And if you're in the process of being able to sign a new contract, it's okay to go back to your agency and ask for justification or changes to the contract before you sign it. I can tell you on the agency side, more likely than not, they will accommodate what it is that you are asking for in the contract, and you guys can come to an agreement on that. But without you advocating for yourself that way, it's possible you'll be signing things that you were not in the know about. So study and know the ins and outs, so you know the landmines. All right, let's move on to number 3, another caffeine break. Number 3 is in regards to results. So results cannot be promised or guaranteed. And this is something that we often find when we are talking to new clients, that they were promised a certain result should you sign on with that agency. Things like, we can grow your revenue by at least, such and such million amount of dollars. Or they'll take a look at the results that you've had with a past agency and say, we can triple these results. Or, We can acquire high dollar donors for you. Our program will make sure that, we get in those high dollar donors, or we can guarantee that your acquisition will break even. You likely have even heard other promises. This is particularly when an agency realizes that your business has gone up for bid and other agencies are coming in to possibly take over that client relationship. Oftentimes you'll start to see promises come out. And one of the things that we think is important to know is that there's no agency under any circumstance that can promise or guarantee a result for you, because results are different for every client, for every organization. So here's a couple of statistics for you so that you can look at your own program and say, was I promised something outside of these? The national average in 2018 for all direct mail, it doesn't matter what kind of direct mail appeal it was, the national average of the response rate was 5.1%. So in our experience, so that's the national, not on any specific industry. In our experience, in the nonprofit world, we would tell you that you can expect a response rate on a direct mail campaign anywhere between 2.5 and 6%. That's really where the bell-shaped curve is. And if you find yourself outside of that curve, or you find yourself being promised something higher than 6%, or you find yourself not garnering that 2.5% at a minimum, it's likely that there's space there for you to optimize your program. And know that if an agency promises you more than that 6.5%, they're making promises that they likely cannot keep. When it comes to acquisition, our experience has shown us that the average acquisition response rate is somewhere between 0.5 and 0.75%. A 1-to-1 ROI on acquisition is exceptional. And so we've heard that an agency will say we can get your acquisition program to break even, and would want you to know that a break-even acquisition package is not the norm. It's in fact far outside the norm, and so it's not something that can be guaranteed. It is not within the bell-shaped curve of what the average is, and that would be cause for a red flag. So it's impossible for an agency to offer you a guarantee. Every organization is different, every package is different, every offer is different. And if you find yourself in a position where you're at the negotiating table and an agency has begun to promise you things, that should be a red flag for you. We would want you to proceed with that with some real caution. And we would want you to ask a couple of questions when you go through that with your agency. The first is, what is the accountability on this kind of guarantee? So is there some sort of kickback to you? Is there some reduction in cost if they can't meet the guarantee that they're promising? The second would be, are there strings attached? Are there statements within their guarantee that are kind of an if and then? If this happens, then we will provide this kind of result. If there are strings attached, that would be a red flag. And then the third and final thing is, are there case studies that they can support this guarantee? Can they show you, here's what we did on another program that's similar to yours, and we can show you how well it's done, and this is why we're making the guarantee. Because we would say that there is no guarantee, so we would want them to back that up. So that's a word of caution about guarantees, especially if your program is out for RFP, something to be very mindful of. All right. We're going to move on here to number 2. I don't know if you're like me, but Chick-fil-A, one of my favorite fast food restaurants to go to. They're famous for their chicken, and they're famous for their waffle fries. They're also famous for their Chickfila Sauce. And that brings me to number 2, that there is no secret sauce in the direct mail campaign world. And I believe that an agency would want you to think that there is. Just like Chick-fil-A wants you to think that Chick-fil-A sauce is kind of a secret sauce, because I don't know if you've noticed, it's not named anything like that you're familiar with. It's not barbecue sauce, it's not honey mustard, it's not ranch, it's not ketchup. What exactly is Chick-fil-A sauce? Nobody really knows. And I think their chicken is good, but I think most people go back for the Chick-fil-A sauce. So the direct mail agency world kind of likes to promote the same sort of mysterious idea that there's a secret sauce to direct mail campaigns. I looked up secret sauce in Webster's dictionary and found it defined this way: a sauce that adds an important element to a dish and that has ingredients which are typically kept secret. So this is what Chick-fil-A does. Interestingly enough, the second definition is that it's a secret element, strategy, procedure that accounts for or increases the chances of success. So this is the theoretical secret sauce that an agency would like you to believe that they have, which is the secret element, the secret strategy, the secret procedure that they're doing to gain results for you. And I would say that there is no secret sauce. If I were to try to break down the ingredients of Chick-fil-A's secret sauce through much trial and error, I could probably get pretty close. In the same way, I can tell you the ingredients of a direct mail program's success. What is the secret sauce? And it's a few things. It's 4 things. The first is it's a well-defined and properly presented offer. What I mean by this is that it's well written, that the offer is relevant to your demographic, that the segmentation of who you're mailing it to has been well thought out and well defined. Your direct mail campaign, the second ingredient would be that it's consistent and timely messaging and branding. So is it going out on time? Is it following a regular schedule and a cadence that people and donors have become familiar with and are expecting? Is it consistent with your branding? Does it stay in tune with who you are? Is the voice part of what your organization is all about? The third is, was the campaign run by a detailed project and team management? Has the team executed drop dates the way they were supposed to? Have they provided good quality control when they were looking through the campaign and things are accurate? There's not typos, there's not mistakes, detailed project management. And then the fourth and final thing is this educated and relevant strategy. I would promote to you that it's this fourth point, this educated and relevant strategy, that is the key ingredient to the quote-unquote secret sauce that an agency is selling. So more often than not, we find that our clients feel like, if I wanted to take the program in-house, I don't know how we would stay educated and know what relevant strategy is. Because an agency will tell you they have case studies, they have testing results, they have new ideas in segmentation or creative, that they are on top of all of the industry news and the updates. And although these things are true, we would say that educated and relevant strategy is something that is learned. It is not an innate ability. And so if that's the secret component to what makes a campaign successful, that an agency can really hold to, we would say you can become a student then of an internal student and an external student to find educated and relevant strategy. Let me tell you what I mean. Externally, I would say, how can I find out what relevant strategy is going on out in the marketplace? Well, the first thing you could do is follow blogs. FutureFundraisingNow.com is a blog that you could follow that talks about direct mail fundraising. Following Next After, they're always talking about relevant strategy and testing, things that are happening out in the marketplace. Another idea would be to sign up as a donor yourself, receive direct mail, and become a student of the donor experience that you have with other organizations. Go to conferences that are specific to direct mail and learn from the people who teach and take good notes. Network with other nonprofiters. When you're sitting around a round table at a conference, ask them, what's working for you? What have you guys tested that you're seeing is working or not working? It is possible to be a student externally around you. And then internally, we would say that you also need to be a student. You need to know your own program. Oftentimes we find that clients aren't really sure what's going on in their program. They don't remember what they tested or haven't tested. They're not keeping good records. They don't necessarily go into a campaign with a strong hypothesis as to why they're testing what they're testing. So we would want you to become a student internally as well. What's going on in my own program that I can tweak and move the needles? What needle am I trying to move? And then finally, how good are your records? If you were to say we ran that test in 2018, can you provide how well it went and how it may not have gone? So becoming a student means that you don't have to worry that somebody else knows the secret ingredient. You actually have it yourself, being an internal and external student. So back to my Chick-fil-A sauce, it doesn't take long actually. You can do a little bit of research and find out what the secret ingredient is in Chick-fil-A sauce, and I just thought it was important that you know it. If you take away nothing else from today, and you make sure that you know Chick-fil-A sauce is nothing but honey, mustard, barbecue sauce, lemon juice, and mayonnaise. And that, my friends, is how Chick-fil-A makes their millions and millions of dollars, by packaging that sweet little mix of 5 ingredients into a little tub and putting it in your box, in your bag. All right, we're down to the last and final secret that the direct mail agencies don't want you to know, and it is this: you are capable of doing the work in-house. I don't need to spend a ton of time on this because we've kind of walked through some of what that means and what that would look like. But knowing now that you know the secret sauce to a successful direct mail program, I'll remind you that it's this: a well and defined and properly presented offer, consistent and timely messaging and branding, detailed project and team management, and educated and relevant strategy. None of those components in and of themselves are anything to be afraid of. They just require some active learning, and you too can become an expert in the direct mail program, and you can do the work on your own. You can take it in-house. Those are the 5 secrets. So, and there's many more. We've sat on a lot of conference rooms where we've talked about how to help our clients and what needles and levers needed to be moved for their campaigns. So there's probably more, and maybe we'll do version 2.0 next year. But hopefully those are helpful to you. So let's move on to some things you can do today. 3 things you can optimize today. The first is, or number 3 is, your donors wear bifocals, so we'd ask that you gear your design and your offer to older eyes. So if this looks like a good representation of your mom and dad, that's who your target demographic is. So studies have been done, and what they found is that charitable giving as a sustained lifestyle type activity isn't meaningfully found until around age 55. And the behavior picks up steam in the following years and gets truly meaningful around 65, where it keeps growing, and then it starts to drop off somewhere around 75. What that means for you is that 55 to 85 is your sweet spot. And so you want to gear your direct mail campaigns and your offers and your design to that sweet spot of the 55 to 85. A couple of interesting things to know the generational mix of people that we're talking about. In 2019, 55 to 85 population in the US was made up predominantly, almost 80%, of boomers. And starting in 2020, boomers are officially being replaced in the donor demographic by Generation Xers. So the Xers this year they're the very first year of Xers are turning 55, and so they're going to join that 55 to 85 sweet spot. There are, interestingly enough, 7 million fewer Generation Xers than there are boomers. So as you can see from this graph, there's going to come a period over the next 20 years where there's actually less donors in the 55 to 85 than there is today, and that's something to be mindful of. Boomers will continue to be the majority of donors until 2033, and then in 2033, Generation Xers will start to outnumber them, and then millennials will start joining the party in 2035. So we're not there yet. Millennials are not part of your core demographic. By 2040, this is what the generational mix will look like. 26% boomers, 50% Gen Xers, and 24% millennials. So knowing that the boomers and Gen Xers make up your donor base and your acquisition prospects, here's a couple simple design points that you can make sure of. Then the first is that you want to make sure you use fonts with serifs in all direct mail. That's a font like this. Serifs is a French word, and it means tails, I believe. I hope nobody out there speaks French, and now all of a sudden I remember there's some Canadians with us who may, and I may have that wrong. But the serifs are the little tails. And studies have shown that reading in serifs is actually easier to read than without serifs. What I can tell you and what I know from my years as a designer is we really like fonts with no serifs. And so oftentimes a designer will really gear themselves towards these very clean lines and want to use a font that has no serifs. It will make itself all the way out into the mailbox and it's harder to read. So you want to use serifs. Number two, also having to do with fonts and tints, is that you don't ever want to type over a tint or use reverse type. It's harder for older eyes to read. And again, your designers who are probably fantastic designers, but may or may not be great fundraisers, oftentimes will want to use this because it's bold and it's attractive and it's clean, but alas, it's hard to read. Finally, 14-point type is preferred, and 12-point font is a minimum. Again, designers love a good, clean look, and so they're going to want to have a small, clean font with no serifs, and this will make it harder for our boomers and Gen Xers to read. And what you'll end up finding is that things that are hard to read more easily go tossed into the trash bin, and so you want to be really careful from a design standpoint. Again, with a 14-point font, another thing to be careful of is the bigger the font, the longer the letter gets, and long letters are the same. They get thrown away. So you want to be careful and find that sweet spot. A couple of things. That's from a design standpoint. This is from a psychology standpoint for our Gen Xers and boomers. Studies have shown that as we age, we tend to experience an increase in the right brain participation of our mental function. The right brain is the emotional, intuitive side of your brain, and it's less interested in details. So we know when we write offers for boomers and Gen Xers, we try to steer away from too heavy into the weeds. We try to steer away from lots of statistics and numbers. They're much more into the emotional side, whereas the left side of the brain sees things in terms of categories. The right brain is much more interested in relationships and emotions. So how do we design and write an offer that gears towards the boomers? We use a lot of images. We try to appeal to their emotions. We tell a lot of stories. A good reminder is to picture the donor as your mom. If you are anywhere near my age, my mom and dad are right in the sweet spot of boomers. And if you can picture yourself writing the offer in a way that you would talk to your mom, you're probably on a good track. And be conversational. Number two, we're going to speed up here just a little bit. So you want to know your pronouns. A good offer expression doesn't use us and we, but only you and your. You've probably heard to make the donor a hero, which we agree with, but we want to remind you that a donor as a hero is just a reminder. We don't want you to literally call the donor a hero. We want you to make them feel like a hero. This is going back to that psychology that we talked about. So if you're going to make them feel like a hero, you're going to want to save things like organizational goals or campaign results or new staff hires, strategic plans. Those kinds of things are very difficult to make the donor the hero in. They're best for your newsletter or your report back. They're not best for an offer in a regular appeal or an acquisition. You want to use phrases like with your support or because of you. Because what that does for the donor is it makes them feel a loyalty towards your organization. It makes them have a positive self-image about the work that they're doing as the donor, and it empowers them to want to be part of your program. So in knowing your program, or your pronouns, we want to say avoid things like please give today so we have the resources, or with your help we can defeat XYZ situation. You can see in there's a mix of pronouns. We're asking you to do something so that we can do something. And when we mix pronouns like that, we actually step in front of the donor and we put the organization back as the hero and not the donor. Instead, you could rephrase those to say, please give today to help change lives, or with your help, the XYZ situation can be defeated. Engaging stories, reasons to give that are believable and relevant to the donors, statements of donor benefit that speak to the motivations. These are all positive things to put in your appeals. Where we run into trouble is when there are too many cooks in the kitchen at your organization, too many people reading and changing the offer that are not necessarily good fundraisers. They may be great at their job, they may be great at creative, they may be great at narration, but they're not necessarily good fundraisers. And oftentimes we find when too many people have access to the appeal and get to make changes, that some of these good rules of thumb go out the window. Finally, number 1, the good news and the bad news. Donors respond to both a need and a hope of a solution. So a good offer has to have both. I don't know if the question is arise, do donors respond to need or do they respond to hope? Are they more likely to respond to a problem or will they respond to having a positive impact? And the answer is probably that they respond to both, and you need to have balanced fundraising. When we talk about bad news fundraising, where we're only talking about the problem, it ends up wearing the donors out over time. Keeping asking them over and over again to solve a problem becomes wearisome. They end up not seeing progress, and so giving doesn't feel like it makes much of a difference. Good news fundraising, where you're just really only talking about, hey, look at all these great things you've done, look at all these lives that have been changed, actually statistically gets a lower response rate because it doesn't talk about the problem that they're solving, and it fails to address that psychology of them being able to rescue someone who's in trouble. Also, good news fundraising lacks urgency. If it's all good news and things are going great, and we've only talked about all of the positive things that are happening, where's the urgency to give? It doesn't seem like you need my money. So good news and bad news fundraising is balanced. You have to have both. So we say, don't shy away from the bad news. It's good to actually spend some time and focus on the problem, and then paint a picture of the better world that a donor can help create by being part of the solution. Put as much energy into describing the problem as you do sharing the solution, because a problem without solution is despair, and a solution without a problem is uninteresting. So to keep them engaged, you want both. You want to express in the offer that we know you care about this problem that we have. With your help, the solution is within reach. Because donors who are cultivated with balanced fundraising keep giving because giving feels like it matters. And again, that goes back to the psychology of it needs to matter to them. They're looking for that relationship and the loyalty. So you want to do both good news and bad news, balanced fundraising. That is the end of 3 things that you can optimize today. So when it comes time to have some questions, and Karen's going to join me here for some questions that you might have, I go back to what we originally had hoped, which is, did you find something in there that was unexpected, that maybe you had suspicions but didn't have any idea about? Or is there something in there that you've been motivated that I'm going to check into that today? And finally, on the optimization, are there things in there where you thought to yourself, that's something that I can change right now? Our hope would be that after hearing all of these things that you would be able to answer some of these and feel like you can go back and optimize some things in your own program.
Thank you.
All right, Karen's here with me.
Hello, everyone.
So, what questions
We have
do
some questions.
All right, go ahead, caller.
All right, Thomas asks, do direct mail agencies have access to better lists than I can get myself? I would not even know how to get a list. If your agency actually has a database they keep themselves, then they may have access that only they can give to you. But there are a lot of great list brokers out there. We work with one that I've known for more than 10 years that writes great list plans. The beautiful thing is most lists, when an organization uses it, that list actually tracks that. So if you're doing acquisition for the first time, you could tell them the type of organization you are, maybe other like organizations, and even look at lists that other organizations like you are using, and then test your way into those. But most of the lists are out there on the market. And so with some guidance, if you've never done it, you could find your way to a great list broker who could build some great list plans for you. Oh, letter length questions. We've got a couple of them here after the comment about letter length. How long of a letter is too long? Somebody else said, I thought research showed that long letters perform better than short letters. Much to what we would disagree with, because most of us don't want to read a long letter. Long letters do tend to perform well for certain types of organizations. Our recommendation would be test your way into it. Sometimes, like if it's a year-end mailing, there's not that much to say in more than 2 pages. But if you're an organization, you're telling a story, which obviously we know is compelling for donors, you might need 4 pages. I've seen some use 6 or 8. That's pretty lengthy, and you would need to have really strong content to fill that 6 or 8. But it's really unique to you, so we would say test your way into that. But don't be afraid of long letters if your testing shows that they win.
I think going back to the have a hypothesis before you actually get into the testing. What is it that what's the needle that you're trying to move? What is the hypothesis? If it's an 8-page letter, our response rate will go up, average gift will go up. So you kind of want to know before you just say, well, let's do an 8-page letter because it seems like longer letters work better. What is the needle you're actually trying to move? It's possible that an 8-page letter may get a better response rate, but if average gift goes down, you kind of have to weigh if that's actually worth it. Especially weighing the cost of an 8-page letter versus a 4-page letter.
Right. Or a 6-page letter.
Right, exactly.
Oh, here's a good font question. Our organization's brand font is a sans serif.
Oh, sans serif.
Should we use something different for our letters?
Yes.
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 For readability.
Right. So I love a sans serif. I'm a Gothic bold person. That's what I use on everything. You find it here throughout the presentation. When it comes to what we're talking about, 4- and 8-page letters, a sans serif font just simply is difficult for older eyes to read. So you can use a sans serif font in a headline. You can even use it on the OE. But when it comes to the actual text and verbiage of the letter, for sure, as ugly as you don't want it, Times New Roman, Georgia, anything that has those little tails on it is unfortunately easier to read. If you ever pick up a book off of a shelf, you won't find any with a sans serif font. Every book is written in serifs. So unfortunately, even if you like it and your designers like it, can't go in there.
Go for the Gen Xers like me. Next question, back to list brokers. Do you have any specific recommendations around list brokers? Elizabeth, yes, we would be happy to send you some names if you wanted to reach out to us. I believe the information that will go at the end is going to have our website, and you can reach out to us then. We'd love to tell you about our friends at some list brokers that we think are doing great work.
Oop, another one's coming on.
So here's another question we get pretty frequently. Okay, I'm bouncing around this idea of bringing my program in-house, but does that mean I have to go hire a bunch of people? That really means the savings I would experience is washed because I've had to go add headcount. It really varies depending on who your current staff are. What we found with a lot of our clients is they actually already have staff in-house who have been managing the agency relationships, and so once that relationship is gone, they're actually freed up to manage the internal work. So most of the time it's about a 2 head count. Sometimes it's only about 1. It really depends on you and who your current staff are. But don't be afraid that it means you're going to add a bunch of head count, because our goal at Mile 19 is when we run estimates on how much you might save if you brought it in, is to have savings after you've added any new FTE costs.
Just to add to that, we have looked at a myriad of budgets over the last, in our agency life and now out on our own. We've looked at budgets, giant organizations, small organizations, and across the board, what we have noticed is on average, 30 to 40 cents of every dollar that is spent on direct mail is going to the agency. So if you think about that, 30 to 40 cents of every dollar, that means 30 to 40% of your total budget for spending costs is going to the agency. You can absorb, very likely you can absorb 1 or 2 headcount well within that 30 to 40 cents on the dollar and still save money. So 30 to 40 cents is a lot. Again, agencies, they have to pay their large overhead. They have to pay for the work that they're providing. And so that's why those costs are kind of high. It's pretty easy to actually justify taking things in-house and still having to hire a person or 2.
Yeah. Any recommendations on how to keep postage rates the lowest they can be? Our friends at the post office make our life interesting, don't they? Main thing would be commingling. If you work with print vendors that don't already commingle, talk to them about that. That's usually how you can get your lowest postage rate. You could also test your way in to who is getting first class or first class pre-sort versus the nonprofit rate. Obviously, there's a big variance between those 2 postage rates that could save you quite a bit if you find that mailing the nonprofit rate actually creates the same response as a first or first pre-sort does. So another question we often get, So as we know from our friends at Next After and doing online work, it's very nimble. You can be very quick to make change. Print, not so easy. Once it's in the mail, it's gone. But we also hear about the frustration of the long lead times. So you're writing a letter 3 to 4 months before it ever goes in the mail. You're pulling data a month before it goes in the mail. And that can be hard, especially if you have an aggressive acquisition program. You want those new donors coming in and getting cultivated as quickly as they can. So one thing that we work with our clients on is how to shorten that. When there's not as many cooks in the kitchen and not as many people having to review it, again, that's something we saw when we were at the agency side. You see how many people have to touch it and how that can really slow you down. So one thing we like about working with our clients is we do try to make it more nimble. Have the freshest data, freshest copy, all those things go in the mail as quickly as possible without these 4-5 month lead times.
Yeah.
Let's see. I think we've hit all the questions. Anybody else have questions to throw in the chat for us? I will say my biggest takeaway, and I feel like you should have had the more you know behind you, is the Chick-fil-A sauce recipe.
I gave it to you.
You gave it to me.
I gave it to you. It wasn't actually hard to find. I was like, this isn't much of a secret.
Yeah.
I'm going to whip it up now. And I don't know if you're like me, but when I go to Chick-fil-A, I'm like, can I have some extra Chick-fil-A sauce? Bring that home.
I stash
Dip
it.
everything in it. Yep.
Do you suggest window envelopes as the best practice, or any tips on envelopes? Same thing there. Test your way into it. I know for many years, kind of how I grew up in agency life was upper donors get a closed face, first class. You want it to feel more personal. Back then it was, you wanted it to feel like it came off the desk of the president's administrative assistant kind of thing. I'm not sure, I think people are onto us in terms of direct mail. So I'd say test your way into it. Again, window can be less expensive because you have less matching. You're not matching 3 different personalized pieces. I know one of our production vendors that we work closely with says in all of their testing, window is just as good as a closed face.
Right.
But again, test your way into it because you want the personalized message to the different donors to be appropriate based on their level of donor. Are quarterly mailings still the best option? I hear a lot of places going to 3 annual mailings. That really depends on your program and how aggressive your fundraising is. We've worked with clients that did 24 appeals a year, 2 a month. We've worked with some that do about 7 or 8. It just depends on the size of your organization and how much you're trying to raise. But the more you're out there communicating, the more you're asking, the more you're probably going to get.
The definite rule of thumb in the direct mail world has always been that the more you mail, the better. There is no doubt about that. So just because the consistency of people seeing it in their mailbox, showing up, if they don't open the first one, there's another one 3 or 4 weeks later that they can then open. So I think that's sort of like the broad rule. But to Karen's point, test it. Know whether or not 3 or 4 moves the needle for you. Is it more about timing? When you mail 3 and when those fall, does it have to be during a quarter? So that would be something. But I want to go back to knowing what it is you're trying to move, because I think there's always this feeling of being compelled, like, well, we got a better response rate, but did average gift go down? And how did those 2 play against each other? What was the cost difference? Did you actually save a lot by going down to 3 versus what you would have brought in should you have mailed that 4th one? So you definitely want to really know what needle you're trying to move. And I think really importantly to follow up with that is to make sure you're taking good notes as to what you've tested and how it changed. Because oftentimes we find that, well, I think we tested envelopes versus, window envelope versus non, but I can't really remember how it did. So then it becomes kind of a moot point and we have to retest it. So just know what needle it is you're trying to move and then really take good records. Right. Be really in the know.
And something else, if you're not already doing it, if there's a concern internally of we don't want so many asks, so many appeals, get a newsletter in the mix that can still be a fundraising piece. It just has a different feel. Almost take a donor ROI approach to it, where they're seeing the impact their gifts are making by seeing photos and stories and things like that. We've seen that sometimes newsletters are a little bit more accepted internally if you're trying to be more aggressive. Go appeal, newsletter, things like that. That would be worth testing as well.
Don't be afraid to ask, even in your newsletter.
My organization insists on sending personal letters and hand addressing mailings to our top donors and prospects, which ends up being 800 people. What's your opinion of this? Well, if you have people to hand address 800 pieces, I think it's a brilliant idea. Anytime we've done hand addressed or even the Gen Pen, that's not really a person, but it looks like it, although I think that's getting more and more common these days. A handwritten definitely gets opens. So if you have volunteers, staff that can hand address, I would say keep doing it. And if the time comes 800 is too many, just change your criteria.
Sure, of
But
who's a major
we're
donor.
all for hand addressing and that real personal touch.
Right. If you have 800 major donors, though, that's great. That's really
Yeah,
good.
kudos.
That's a lot. That's good.
Kudos.
Our appeals are starting to stall in terms of amount raised. Do you have any tips to determine where we should add in another appeal? Well, how many appeals are we sending right now? Our appeals are starting to stall in terms of amount. Okay.
Yeah, I think it would depend on what we would call pillar appeals. Do you have a matching challenge or a matching grant that's every April? Maybe do a follow-up to that. Look at the ones that are doing well and see if there's a scenario that you could do a follow-up. Or those that are struggling, is it time to take it apart and rebuild it? But that's, again, where we would have to know probably a little bit more about your program to give better tips.
Sure, but certainly you can email us or whatever, and we'll grab a phone call with you and talk about it. For acquisition, how many times do you mail an individual that doesn't give before you pull them off the list?
Yeah, that kind of depends on how aggressive your acquisition is. If you mail 12 times a year, you probably don't want to keep mailing that name because they're going to get real irritated. If you do a multi-buyer approach to your acquisition, where if somebody appears on more than one list, they actually get that acquisition package twice within one campaign, that's more aggressive to a prospect. So I think it really depends on how aggressive your prospecting program is, and your tolerance for complaints.
Right.
So if internally it's like we don't want complaints, then I would say only do it a few times, pause that name for a while, maybe come back to it 6 months later, kind of thing.
Right. Eventually they will call and be like, stop mailing me.
Yeah, then you put them on your no-mail list. And then,
Now all of
then
a sudden
you're
they're being suppressed.
Right,
It's totally
right.
different. Are inserts that support the content in the letter good to include with the letter?
I would say yes if it's compelling. So, you see some packages that maybe a woman from the Crisis Pregnancy Center has written the letter, or if you have somebody from the field saying, we just want to tell you how much the food that you shipped to whatever part of the world it is making a difference in the lives of children. Firsthand stories are really compelling. So if you have good firsthand stuff that they could actually do a lot of the storytelling, then you could have a cover letter from the letter signer that still does the ask and the heavy lifting from the fundraising side of it. But it's a good way to mix it up too. So it's just not always the same type letter. But again, it's all about the content. If it's good content.
One of the things I would say too is we say in the content of the letter, we kind of want to steer clear of a lot of statistics or numbers or things that become detail heavy. But oftentimes if you have something that's really pertinent, that is statistic numbers related, putting an insert in there is a nice way to take it out of the letter, but have it still available to the person who is interested in those deeper details and does want to go a little bit further into the weeds. So again, you want to weigh the cost, like how much is this insert going to cost the package? Is that going to really move the needle enough to make it worth it? But if it is, and oftentimes inserts do kind of bulk up a bit of an envelope, make it a little bit more so that it stands out, it's a really great place to put in kind of some of the details or pictures or things that didn't fit right in the letter, but you still really want the donors to read about.
Yeah. All right, we're 3 minutes over. So we're going to wrap up. But if you have more questions for us, feel free to reach out to us. Our website is mile19marketing.com, or our email is thoward@mile19 or kberman@mile19.
Or
We'd love to hear
info-
from you. Or
info
info.
at
That might be
mile19marketing.
easier. info@mile19marketing.com. Thank you for joining us today. We're thankful for our friends at Next After giving us this chance to share a little bit with you. And as Nathan mentioned, details will go out this evening with a copy of the webinar.
Find us on the web.
Thank you. And get your Chick-fil-A sauce recipe.
Yeah, right.